Vapor blasting can achieve pretty incredible results, bringing up some old used parts to look like they're brand new and have come just out of the mold. But how nasty can a part be before it's unsavable? Well, let's see how well this one goes. This is an old flywheel from I believe a mower. It's been sitting outside in a bucket probably for about 10 years, 15 years or so, and it is absolutely scodious, covered in corrosion, there's rust, it's just a real mess. So I'm going to go give that a quick water blast while the water blast is out, get rid of as much of that corrosion and as much of that growth on it as possible to keep contamination out of the vapor blaster, and then we'll get the vapor blaster set up and we'll see how nice we can bring this up. So let's go give it a quick water blast. We're already looking a lot better, just having got all of that real scummy corrosion off, all that crystalline growth, but it still looks pretty terrible. So the question is, can we bring that up to look like one of these very nice looking parts? So we'll just get set up, we'll go throw it in the machine and we'll see what sort of condition we can bring this one up to. Alright, so we're set up in the cabinet now, just going to turn it on. Nice good flow. Right. See, it's already starting to come up. It's pretty good, so let's see how quick we can get through it. In addition to the large silver nozzle that I started blasting with, they're also available with these little brass nozzles. Now I make these up myself here in New Zealand out of a whole bunch of imported parts, but they're also very effective, especially if you only have a smaller compressor. So these are set up with a smaller air jet and a slightly smaller nozzle, but they're still highly effective. Let me just find a little bit, there's still got quite a bit to go, maybe just that spot down there by my palm, and let me just show you how these ones come up. That came up pretty quickly as well. So now that I've got it on, I think I'll finish it with this nozzle and then I'll pull it out and we can have a look at the results. There's still a lot of dark patches on it, but I have a sneaking suspicion that's just the pitting. So we'll pull it out, have a look. There's a good chance I've missed a few spots, but we can always fire it back in and redo them. But other than that pitting, it actually looks like the finish has come up quite nicely. So let's take it out, rinse it off, give it a bit of a dry, and we'll see how it looks. One of the other features of this cabinet is that it's been set up so you can isolate the pump, but the solenoid will still function. So the idea is, with the pump off, all the media will settle to the bottom of the reservoir, and then by actuating the air solenoid, it'll actually siphon the clean water up, or cleanish water up, and allow you to use it as a kind of a wash down nozzle, and you can wash down the whole inside of the cabinet, and particularly the door, because a lot of media will rest up against the door along the seal, and if you don't give that a rinse off when you open it, you can make a big mess. And glass beads on the floor are actually quite slippery, so it's quite important to, when you finish doing the job, give it a quick rinse out, just to make sure that you keep your workspace as tidy as possible. So I'll just show you that now. The result. As I suspected, a lot of those dark patches were just terrible pitting. Now if you look there, you can see very lightly a little bit of colour coming up on the little square there. Now that square is the magneto pickup on the flywheel, so it's actually iron. Now it comes up looking very similar to the alloy, but you will notice in some of the pitting there, there's just a little bit of colour on it. Now that's flash rust. So when the metal is bare and it's been wet, it rusts very easily, very quickly. Now there are additives that you can put into the cabinet to prevent that if you're doing a lot of iron, but because my setups that I have here mainly do aluminium, I haven't bothered putting any in. If I do get a large amount of iron based parts to blast, then I will put something like Hold Tight 102 in there, which is just a rust inhibitor. But as you can see, it was in horrible condition before. Half of these gullies were actually quite full of material. I'll put up a comparison. If I just slide that over to that side there, there's plenty of room to bring up an overlay of what it looked like before. So that gives you an idea of the difference. And as you'll see before, that was the part before that I held up next to it before. And just next to each other. So they come up pretty much the same, despite the horrific condition that was in. So I had a couple of stops while I was changing nozzles over. This is a new cabinet. It has been put through its testing stages before it gets sent out. Every nozzle, every cabinet gets tested before it gets sent out, so you're not going to get a cabinet turn up or a nozzle turn up that doesn't work. But yeah, it gives a pretty good example of the type of finish you can get on parts that really look like they should be thrown out. Despite the pitting in this really could have just come out of a mold. Beautiful luster on it. And you can see how deep that pitting is. And that's where that dark colour comes from. But if you look into the areas where the pitting isn't quite as bad, get it to focus, or there you can just see how well it brings up that finish. On parts that aren't quite badly as damaged, it comes up actually a lot better. Or for example, they're very delicate, so you can see right there in the ring gaps, it's actually got right the way in there and put that nice finish on everything. So yeah, incredibly versatile machinery. It'll do alloys, it'll do metal, it even does plastics and rubbers. So yeah, they're a fantastic machine to have around. If you are restoring things, or if you're consistently rebuilding engines and the like, Good for marine applications. The finish actually is like a peened surface, so it doesn't quite have the stress reducing features that you get with proper shot blasting, shot peening, but it does have a peening effect, and it will actually smooth surfaces. So on marine parts, it's actually harder for the crystalline structures to start building, meaning that they'll actually hold their finish for a little bit longer than many other applications, particularly sandblasting. Sandblasting can be notoriously bad for leaving a finish that not only gets grubby easy, and you see my hands are quite dirty at the moment. If I just rub my hand over there, it doesn't really pick up. If you use a sandblasted part, it's not the same. I rub my finger over it the same way, it'll actually come up quite filthy actually. Now, as you would have seen during the video before, actually blasting the parts, a lot of water and media comes up onto the glass here and actually obscures your view. That's why all the cabinets, the Workshop Pro this size and the larger cabinets, have a wiper system on them. Like to see, it's actually self-barking, so if I let it off, it'll actually go back to the start there. So that's the first thing of all, very, very important for vapor blasting. The gloves, these are some of my favorites. Now, they will break down over time like all gloves do, but these ones here are sealed, they're lightweight, and you actually have a lot of dexterity with these gloves. So by far my favorite. Perhaps the rubber ones last a little bit longer. They are an option, but as for dexterity and holding small parts, I definitely prefer these. You can probably see around the edges we've got LED lighting strips. Again, with the blasting process, it does kick up a lot of mist and it's very difficult to see, so having a good lighting system is pretty well paramount to being able to blast without having to stop and allowing that mist to drop down. And particularly if you're getting into small crevices, it can be very difficult to see what you're doing, so having good light is very, very important. Now, you would have noticed that halfway through we ended up changing the nozzles. Now, that's because I wanted to show both. Now, these are both available with all the cabinets. This here is an imported one and will come with an 8, 10 or potentially a 12mm nozzle for the very large setups. They work alright, but I find particularly with the smaller air supply setups, just regular compressors, they're probably a little bit much. Now, they have a 4mm air jet on the inside there, and they require a lot of air to operate. Now, these smaller ones have been set up for the average workshop that doesn't quite have such a grunty air supply. They'll still use more than most compressors will supply, most retail compressors will supply, but they are actually a lot nicer to work with because it doesn't take so long for the compressor to refill, and many compressors will actually keep up to the point where if they are running, they will continue to blast. So it's not ideal for them. They should go through a duty cycle, but these are much better suited to the smaller supplies. So that's why I gave a demonstration of both of them. They are both available in these cabinets. This one here I make myself out of parts imported all over the world, but put together here in New Zealand. Now, as I mentioned, there is a lot of mist that gets built up in these cabinets. So to get around that, if you come around the side here, we've got a nice big 12-volt automotive fan, and that actually creates a nice cross draft across the cabinet to make sure that a lot of that mist doesn't get in. And that's just dangled right over a nice stainless steel junction box in there, and that fan can be operated from here. So the cabinet is built out of stainless. Previous designs have been powder coated and mild steel, but they just don't hold up. So the new cabinets are all going to be built from stainless, just provide a little bit of longevity to the life there, and particularly if they're not being used on a daily basis, with the water sitting in them, if you do have just mild steel applications, they will rust very, very quickly. So the new ones will all be made from stainless. and besides that, it actually looks fantastic. So I'm very happy with the new designs.